You're welcome to do it.
Okay.
Okay. We have the luxurious 4 minutes.
Do we?
We have a luxurious 4 minutes.
4 minutes.
Shabbat shalom. Yes. I wore my red too. I suspect 3 minutes. But it could be as few as 2. Oops.
We want to say Shabbat Shalom. We want to also say hola
Hola.
and welcome. Bienvenidos. We're very happy to all be together on this Shabbat where we're going to share some stories and some music and some instruments from a community that is a little bit forgotten, and we're hoping to bring them more to your consciousness, the Jews of Cuba. So let's start out with a little bit of singing, page 10. We'll sing together, Ma Yafeh Hayom. How lovely, how beautiful is this Shabbat time together. hayom, Shabbat shalom. Mayafe hayom, Shabbat shalom. Mayafe hayom, Shabbat shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom. Mayafe hayom, Shabbat shalom. Mayafe hayom, Shabbat shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom.
How lovely
From
is this
Cuba.
day from Cuba. Some of the things we brought back with us from Cuba. How lovely is this Shabbat day wherever we might be, here in Portland or in Cuba or wherever people who are watching us on our live stream. You might be anywhere, but we're glad that you're here. We're glad we can be together for this Shabbat and welcome the beauty of this time together. Let's make sure that everyone is welcomed and a part of the community. Please turn to someone around you, wish them a Shabbat Shalom, welcome them to our service. We have some new people here today. And for anyone I didn't get a chance to meet, Rabbi Michael Kahana, Cantor Ida Ray Kahana. We're all glad to be together. We're still greeting, because it's so good. We'll have a little bit more time for that. And we also have a special oneg after we see some pictures about the trip. So we've got lots of wonderful things going on today. We're talking about Cuba because a group of us came back not very long ago from a trip, and particularly with a connection to the Jewish community there. So for the travelers to Cuba who were there, I'd like to invite you to come up and light the candles for Shabbat for us. We're on page 2, so all of our Cuba group that are here tonight.
Everybody from our Cuba trip that would like to, please come on up. Yeah. We have a little.
Well, this one you
There's
squeeze.
matches.
Or use matches.
Please, take the honor.
No.
Sue, but I have to do matches because I am,
Come close.
it's technology.
Come on over here, so that you're in the video.
Okay.
Importante.
Yes.
Come on.
The little limited Spanish, I know.
Okay. Baruch
Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu b'hadlik ner shel Shabbat. Amen. And while we have the light, we're going to have a little bit of the taste of Shabbat. We'll ask you all to rise for Kiddush, page 5. You all can stay up here and sing with me. That would be great. Page 5. Here's a prayer. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kodsho b'ahava uvratzon yinchilanu. זיכרון למעשה בראשית, כי הוא יום תחילה למקראי קודש, זכר יציאת מצרים. כי באנו בחרת ואותנו קידשת מכל העמים, ושבת קודשך באהבה וברצון הנחלתנו. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת. Amen. L'chaim.
L'chaim.
L'chaim. Thank you. Shabbat shalom. Thank you. Thank you.
We're continuing on page 20.
Please be seated.
Page 20, L'chadodi likrat kala, come let us welcome together the bride of Shabbat.
Before we welcome that bride, let me just tell you that we're going to be singing verses 1, 2, 5, and on verse 9, we'll rise and we'll face whichever door we like to symbolically welcome the bride, for those of you who are new to our community, so you know where we are. It's so interesting. Also, I just had to say, when we were in Cuba, you know, we were hoping to hear, we thought we were going to hear music with a Spanishy kind of flair like Ladino, but that's not what we got. We got
Not in the synagogues.
Not in the synagogues, yeah. In the streets, you get the Afro-Cuban, but in the synagogue, what you got was, and you'll hear more about this later, the Ashkenazi. And so the melody that I'm singing tonight, which we're very familiar with, is what they sang in Cuba, which kind of surprised us. They had a little bit of a fun rhythmic flair, which I honestly can't remember, and I wish I had been less discreet and recorded the music. So we'll do our best, but we'll have to thank Cuba. Go ahead.
I'll do this, okay.
L'chadodi.
With accompaniment.
L'chadodi l'kala v'neshavat ne'afela. L'chadodi l'kala v'neshavat ne'afela. Shalom d'achari b'rechad ishmi'anu elam yuchad Adonai echad u'shemo echad l'shemo tiferet v'litila l'chadodi l'kala v'neshavat ne'afela. L'chadodi l'kala v'neshavat ne'afela. Likrat Shabbat l'chol f'necha ki mekol ha'beracha me'osh mikdem ne'sucha sof ma'aseh b'machshava tchila. L'chadodi l'kala v'neshavat ne'afela. L'chadodi l'kala v'neshavat ne'afela. Hitoreri kiva orech kunyori ori v'shidaberi kivod Adonai alayich nigla l'chadodi l'kala v'neshavat ne'afela. L'chadodi l'kala v'neshavat ne'afela.
remain standing as we invite each other to prayer with Baruch Hu. Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bidvaro ma'ariv aravim, v'chochma poteach she'arim. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who speaks the evening into being, skillfully opens the gates, thoughtfully alters the time, changes the seasons, arranges the stars in their heavenly courses according to plan. You are creator of day and night, rolling light away from darkness and darkness from light.
Baruch atah Adonai ha'mariv aravim.
Wisdom and wonder, we're on page 33. Wisdom and wonder, passion and instruction, story and symbol. All these things your Torah gives to us. The more we devote ourselves to it, the more it grows and gives. What could be a truer token of your abiding love than this holiest of your works, the living language that gives it form?
Baruch atah Adonai, ohev amo Yisrael. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuto Leolam Vaed. Please be seated, and we continue on page 36, chanting together. V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levacha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol meodecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם לאורות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם. אמן.
Page 41. Sing the song of men and women joined in understanding and respect, the song of God's miracles, an earth protected and cherished, a gift for our children and the generations to come, the song of a land once ravished by war, now quiet, content, her soldiers home to leave no more, the song of a world redeemed, the song of peace.
Bye.
ונאמר כי פר אדוני את יעקב וגואלו מיד חזק ממנו. ברוך אתה אדוני גל ישראל.
Let's read together in the middle of page 44. The people of Israel shall keep Shabbat, observing Shabbat throughout the ages as a covenant for all time. It is a sign for all time between me and the people of Israel. For in 6 days Adonai made heaven and earth, and on the seventh day God ceased from work and was refreshed.
Okay, I know this is dangerous, but I'm going to offer these up.
Ooh. Marty is a
Any
professional.
takers? It doesn't have to be the Cuba trip. It could be.
Anybody who wants a little
We
bit
got,
of rhythm?
we got. Come on,
okay.
Claire. Come on, Claire. You want maracas?
Yeah.
Claire gets the
Clave?
clave. You can say
Wait,
no.
wait. From here.
No, no sneaking.
No sneaking.
Oh.
No
Oh, you're going to sneak
No,
over
sneaking.
there.
No, you're good. You're
I'm
good.
doing what she's doing.
Okay.
Unruly Jews.
Well, we have to observe and keep Shabbat in a lot of different ways. And those ways include music and rhythm and dance and joy. And so that's all part of it. The
A
shaman.
little bit of a different rhythm of the shofar.
ושמרו בני ישראל, בני ישראל, את השבת לעשות, את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ושמרו בני ישראל, בני ישראל, את השבת לעשות, את השבת
Taking this group on the road. It's a short road. It's a good road. Page 46, if you are able and would like to, you please rise for tefillah, page 46.
Adonai אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש וקדושים בכל יום ילדו חסלה. ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
You are holy and your name is holy, and those who are holy praise you every day. Blessed are you, Adonai, the holy God. Please be seated. Page 55, let's read together on the top of the page. May these hours of rest and renewal open our hearts to joy and our minds to truth. May all who struggle find rest on this day. May all who suffer find solace. May all who hurt find healing on this day. May all who despair find purpose. May all who hunger find fulfillment on this day. And may this day fulfill its promise. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh haShabbat. Let's take a moment of quiet prayer for us to be able to reflect a little bit, to have our own internal place of sacred prayer.
Michael Barnes is going to start playing a beautiful meditation. It's okay. And it was written by Ben Steinberg, who was an amazing composer of Jewish music. He wrote the beautiful Shalom Rav that most of us are familiar with, that we sing every high holidays. And he wrote this, and at the time he was brought in to where I was a cantorial soloist. It was in the 80s, I wasn't a cantor yet. And I worked with him during that weekend, and he is one of the reasons that I realized, I should be a cantor. And his father was a chazan. He was steeped in all the beautiful nusach and all the beautiful melodies. So it's a tribute to him.
meditations of my heart be acceptable to you, Adonai, my rock and my redeemer. And we say, Amen.
Amen. This Shabbat is also special on a national level. Some of you may have seen that we're also celebrating what they're calling, I think this is a little unfortunate, but Repro Shabbat, but it stands for reproductive rights. Once I figured it out, I was like, oh, I thought it was a technical term at first, but anyway. So it's, in other words, that we should be able to have the rights that we enjoy for all of us who identify as women, and we should not have those rights taken away from us. It's a very Jewish value. So this Shabbat
Comes particularly from this Shabbat, because this week's Torah portion has a, oh, you can say something.
No,
about
go.
has a text that really is used as the understanding of the Jewish position on abortion, and the reason that that Judaism sees that as a focus on maternal rights primarily, so the welfare of the one carrying the child. So can talk about that text another time if you want, but that's why they chose this Shabbat to be focused on reproductive rights.
The National Council of Jewish Women have designated this as that Shabbat. So I would encourage you either, sometime during this weekend or sometime during this week while you're still thinking of this, to go to their website or to contribute to whatever cause will help further reproductive rights. And
considering some of the news that we've heard this week about laws that can actually have a woman accused of murder, where this is the extremes that we're going to in this country right now. And though we are thankful to be living in a state that does protect reproductive rights, we know that privilege carries with it a responsibility to make sure that those rights are protected for everyone.
so we're including this as a kind of introduction to our healing prayer, praying for each other's personal healing, those who are near and dear to us, for whom we are praying for refuah shalema, for complete healing of body, of mind, of spirit, and as well for the healing and the health of our country. May our country become a place of liberty and justice for all, and may our care for one another include care and respect for each other's right to good and affordable health care, including abortion care, and right to live safely and securely as we each follow our path of conscience and the God we each do or do not believe in. And we say, Amen. Amen. And if you would like to share the name of someone you're holding in your hearts tonight, please do so. And we'll sing together our Misha Berach. It's not in your book. Avraham, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov. Mi shebeach imoteinu, Sarah, Rivka, Leah, v'Rachel. May the one who blessed our mothers, may the one who blessed our fathers, hear our prayer.
Hear our prayer.
Hear our prayer.
Hear our prayer.
Hear our prayer. Hear our prayer and bless us as well. Bless us with the power of your healing. Bless us with the power of your hope. May our hearts be filled with understanding and strengthened by the power of your love. Misheberach Avotenu, Avraham, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov.
and healing to all who are in need. And we say,
Amen.
Page 282, we'll rise if we're able to, for Aleinu. Turn to those who have departed this earth, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every race and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and of death. We honor the memories of those in our community who have recently died. Max Adelson, Jeff Altman, Cantor Ben Steinberg, Robert Tobias. And we honor the memories of those whose Yortzites, the anniversary of their passing, occurs during this time. Lee Ackley, Nathan Adler, Teresa Bergenstein, Abraham I. Block, Julius Buddy Bombett, Sally Bookbinder, Leonard A. Bergen, Joan Asher Can, Dave Cogan, Sue Reynolds Cruz, Dorothy Davidson, Lorraine Davis, Marvin L. Diamond, Irving Dubin, Don Felton, Rita Geller, Edith Gellhart, Edith Goodman, Frida Goodman, Samuel Hahn, Edgar Hexter, Henry Harold Hirsch, Lawrence Hoffman, Erwin B. Holzman, Rachel Hornblass, Armin Horwitz, Max Isaacson, Dora Calfsider, Roy L. Calver, Sylvia Kaplan, Ethel G. Killenson, Max D. Killenson, Eric Kellner, Gunther Knapp, Cantor Chaim Cohen, Rabbi Zalman Cohen, Doris Kreis, Sylvia Chris Newman, Antoinette Lawrenson, Rosalind E. Levine, Ann Liebman, Fanny Loengart, Abe Margolin, David Danny Mayton, Abraham Chaim Meltzer, Marion M. Meltzer, Donna Miller, Esther Mink, Monford Orloff, Irving Ovitz, Lisa Oziel, Reba M. Payne, Carlton R. Ryder, Thelma Rosen, Neil Sandler, Bessie Savinar, Sadie Schaefer, Elsie Rosenbaum Sherlin, Lenore Simpson, Judge Gus J. Solomon, Caitlin Soltes, Molly S. Strait, Dolly Tall, Dora Tall, Lois Tobin, William Isaac Trachtenberg, Adele Tunick, Marvin J. Ehrman, Arnold Winters, Harvey Winthrop, Edith Zavin, Lillian Zidell, Rose Zivin. If anyone else is honoring a Yortzeit, or if I mispronounced a name, would like to share a name with us, please do so now. The memories of all of them are with us. Our griefs and our sympathies are mingled. On page 294, we rise if we're able, and we say together the words of Kaddish. Yit gadal v'yit gadash me rabah, be'alma divra chirute v'yamlich malchute, b'chayechon v'yomechon, uv'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, ba'gala v'zman kari v'imru. Amen. Yehei shmei rabah mevorach leolam ulomei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shemei dekudusha breichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehei shlam araba min shmaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. May the one who creates harmony on high bring peace to us, to all the people Israel, and to all of the world. And we say, Amen. Please be seated. Page 327. Although, actually, we're going to say, do a motzi first.
And announcements?
Oh, announcements.
Very quick.
Oh, do we have any announcements? Very quick. Yes, Purim. Purim is coming up.
March
6th, Monday, March 6th. Spielen in the rain. You don't have to wear a raincoat. It'll be okay. But we'll be gathering with great joy. This group has been working very, very hard. And as perhaps you've seen in some of the emails that have gone out, they're even tap dancing. So this will be quite different. But hope you'll come and enjoy that. It'll be a lot of fun.
Next week is Sisterhood Shabbat. Do not miss that. It's always a really beautiful service, very meaningful. It's okay, Rabbi. Okay. Anyway, because it's, right, Sisterhood Shabbat, he's out of here. No. So anyone who identifies as female, please, you're welcome to come next Friday. And,
That's what happens when you try to do something like this.
So that's next. It's so much going on.
So much going on.
There's that. There's something else. There's this Sunday. It's not our event, but JFCS is going to be here Sunday at 2, and Professor Natan Meir is going to be speaking about Soviet Jews and the connection to the Holocaust. That's open to the public.
I believe so.
Anything I'm missing? I'm always looking at Sally because I feel like Sally will know. Am I missing it?
Taste
of Temple. Thank you,
March 19th.
Linda. Okay, March 19th,
And
if you
then
haven't bought
Passover's
tickets.
coming. Oh.
But, yeah,
Won't
don't
get too
miss
far
Taste
ahead
of
of
Temple, the return
Yes.
of that. Okay.
Be very good.
The reason Rabbi got challah is so that after the presentation and everything, we can just go straight to, there's an augmented oneg, so we can enjoy. So let's say motzi. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. You eat on behalf of me. Amen. We're going to end with a little Ladino, even though Ladino is not the language spoken in Cuba, but just because. It still sounds like Spanish. So we're going to actually end with an Ein Keloheinu. It's on page 327. 327, and it has a Ladino part. So it's Ein Keloheinu and also Non como nuestro Dios. So if you haven't already sung this, it's very fun. Maybe everybody needs to stand up. You've been sitting a long time. So go ahead and sit or stand, and then you'll sit again for the presentation.
Mich
wait. Here we go. Last verse.
Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adonenu, Atahu Malkeinu, Atahu Moshiach, Tu sos nuestro Dios, Tu sos nuestro Señor, Tu sos nuestro Rey, Tu sos nuestro
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat
Thank you to our
shalom.
musicians. Thanks very much. So I'm going to take just a moment to set up to prepare for our talk. So if you want to stretch, run to the restroom, anything along those lines, we'll just take a little moment. Thank you. Get some water. Do you want to come close by, and then you can join in anytime you want? Tell me why I'm wrong. Stuff up. Oh, yeah,
Anything
just
else?
one. Nope, just one hour. Probably that's more problematic. All right, welcome. Thank you for coming to this, and it's really a pleasure to share with you a little bit about this trip. I think many might wonder, of all places in the world, why did we go to Cuba? The temple has a group of people who've been traveling. We've done a number of different trips around the world, and we thought we would, part of what was really interesting was exploring a little bit about the experience of the Jewish expulsion from Spain. So we were in Spain, and one of the strongest feelings we had there was the way that it was described on the trip, was the presence of absence. The fact that there was lots of stuff about Jews. You could go to lots of cemeteries. You go to lots of synagogues that were unused. They had everything except Jews. And that's the result of this expulsion that happened 1492. But still the Jewish community, although it does exist, but it really has not come back into fullness. And then there's a question of where did the Jews go? So we did a little bit of exploration in some of our trips over the years, including into the southern United States, where a number of what have been known as crypto-Jews found their way coming up from South America and Central America. But Cuba seemed like this was a place to sort of continue that exploration. But of course, as Cantor said, what we didn't find was Sephardic Jews. We didn't find that movement. But Cuba is truly a fascinating place. We went with a group that does Jewish tours, Ayelet tours. Okay, you could sit down if you like. The experience of going to Cuba is different than in many other countries. Because this is going to be a recurring theme, because of the embargo that still exists, it's extremely difficult to travel to Cuba. One of the ways, you have to go on special visas, and one of the visas you can go on is as a religious organization, doing service to the religious communities that are there. Interesting for a communist country. They're very open to, they're not anti-religion. They don't support religion, they promote religion, but they're also not anti-religion. And so being able to go on a religious group visa, Ayelet is one of the groups that do that, but it's a long, kind of complicated process to getting there. We fly from Miami, a short 90-mile trip, and that's part of the story of Cuba. And what's really significant as we talk about Cuba historically, we did a lot of reading and research about it. One of the things that makes Cuba so important is just its location and its size in its location. But as the pathway from Europe into the Caribbean, anywhere around in the Caribbean, or up north into the Gulf of Mexico, you have to go by Cuba. And so it was long a place that was protected, and the Spanish army, the American army, wanted to control it because it was this gateway into Central America, into the southern part of the United States. America's role in the history of Cuba is long and very complicated one. One good example is that long after slavery was outlawed in Europe and in the United States and in Cuba, American ships were still bringing slaves into Cuba. And they were doing it because Cuba at that time was a monoculture, and the crop was sugar. Sugar was king. All over the world, Cuba provided most of the sugar for the world. Sugar is a very labor-intensive crop, and slavery was essential for maintaining that industry. And so whether legally, illegally, it didn't matter. America primarily, and others, were bringing slaves into Cuba long after it had been outlawed. And America was, no, those aren't working. Oh, they're not working? No, that's okay. We'll just kind of have to. Or I was told they weren't working. You could tell me. No, Dallas told me the whole thing wasn't working. But part of our desire was to engage with the Jewish community. So we flew to Santa Clara, in the center of the country, and from there we were in Havana. These were the only two places that we visited, and the only two places where there's Jewish community at all in the island. People often ask how many Jews are in Cuba. At its height, before the revolution in 1959, there were probably, what did they say, about 20,000 Jews on the entire island. Many of them industrialists or people supporting the industries that were there. Most of those Jews left in 1959 at the revolution. Many of those Jews, I just saw a fascinating documentary about the Jews who escaped Europe early on, but those who kind of read the signs of what was happening, and a very large contingent of Jews came to Cuba as a safe haven, and they built up a diamond industry that was there, which was very interesting. Many of them came from Antwerp and just repeated the industry that they had there. They produced diamonds that were sold all over the world, and then the Jewish community left and the entire industry went out of existence. But the Jewish community as it stands right now, from that, say, perhaps 20,000 who were there at the time, is probably about 1,000 individuals out of 11 million people. So a very tiny remnant is left of the Jewish community. And what's going to happen to that Jewish community is part of our story today. We went in Santa Clara to this lovely, lovely small synagogue, and above the ark was that symbol that I used at the very beginning, which is kind of the symbol that I have for this trip, of the island of Cuba underneath with a menorah and a Star of David over, our sort of exploring Cuba. But this very lovely little community that serves 3 other cities in the area, and among them probably 50 people will come to this synagogue, some traveling a little bit of a distance. But it's the only synagogue that exists outside of Havana. Now, one of the interesting things that we had was the gentleman you can see on the side who was the leader of the community. His brother had been the real leader of the community. He knew how to daven. He knew how to teach. He was very, very knowledgeable, and then he left for Israel. And so this guy's left kind of leading the community, not as knowledgeable as his brother. And that's part of the story. The Jewish community is leaving, like everyone else in Cuba. Cubans are leaving in large numbers if they're able. They try to come to the United States. If they can make their way to the U.S. border, once they get across the border, they have expedited status. They have more rights than anybody else coming from Latin America because they're political refugees. But getting there is the hard part. And it's extremely difficult to get there. But the Jewish community is going to Israel. All of the young people especially are finding their way to Israel. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. But part of our responsibility there was to bring gifts. So we brought the congregation and those of us who were traveling collected all kinds of goods. What do they need? Basically, the answer is, what do you got? Because of the embargo, it's impossible to get almost anything. All goods are extraordinarily difficult to produce. One of the things that struck me the most, Cuba is an island. The ordinary Cubans can't get fish because most of the fish is imported, and the fishing boats that would normally be out there are being used to try to sneak people into Florida. So the ordinary people just, they can't even get fish. So, and all kinds of goods. So what happens is the Jewish community, because communities like ours bring goods, hand carry these goods, that's what they depend on. And we brought all kinds of things, right? Guitar strings, medication, very important. It's fascinating because Cuba has, as a communist country, 100% free health care. You can see a doctor anytime you want, to see a specialist anytime you want, anything that you need. But if they prescribe anything, you can't get the medications. Because there is an industry in Cuba that produces some medications. They produced a COVID vaccine, for example, but most medications are extreme, even over-the-counter medications are extremely hard to get. So we brought aspirin, we brought underwear, we brought whatever we could bring. And we carried several bags of supplies, which we distributed. The synagogues, we have our image of what a synagogue is like, as a house of prayer, as a house of study, as a house of community. In Cuba, the synagogues are distribution centers as well. They are places where the goods that are brought hand-carried or brought in by the JDC, Joint Distribution Committee. See about them in just a minute. And Canadians are actually able to send things directly. Other countries, it's America that really can't, and America does blockade most of what comes in, but they allow things from Canada. And those goods are distributed to the Jewish community, whatever it is that people need. So it's fascinating to see some of that distribution. We'll see that in a second. We did some, what I should say, I'm sorry, Cantor's here sharing a CD from Congregation Beth Israel of our music to some of in the Cuban community.
And I'm wearing Lolly Sandler's earrings.
It's a little advertisement, so if anybody wants to talk. We traveled around the country. We did a lot of touring as well. And by the way, some of the group that's here that traveled with us haven't seen these pictures. These are the pictures I took. I took about 2,000 pictures. So we're about at 1,998 now. Hope you're strapped in. No, this is a small selection of the pictures that I took. But at the very beginning, we went to the memorial for Che Guevara. Very interesting. Another little interesting data point. You will not see statues of Fidel Castro in Cuba. That at Castro's request or demand, I guess if you're a dictator, you get to demand these things. He didn't want to be idolized, as so often happens in communist countries, where everything is about dear leader. He didn't want that for himself. So he was perfectly fine to let Che Guevara be idolized. And so you see lots of things. This is an incredible monument in Santa Clara to Che Guevara, but you don't see Fidel. It's very, very kind of interesting. Just another look at our group because it's a very good-looking group. This was our guide, Eric Cabrera, who was a local guide, and the other professionals who were with us, Darian, our driver, and our guide from Ayelet, Bill Cardiff. Bill has done many trips to Cuba, and so he really knew the local scene, and Eric was really an incredible guide. One of the things that I noticed was how much transportation might be horse-drawn or pedal power or walking. What I think the image that most people have in Cuba is of the classic cars, and there are definitely lots of classic cars. I have no idea how they run these things because gas is extremely expensive, difficult to come by, and of course, not always easy to keep these cars in repair. And so you would see these great old cars by the side of the road. One of the things that's fascinating about them, they all look beautiful on the outside, and the engines are not at all original. They're actually all Russian. Remember that it was it was a communist state, a Russian, a part of the Soviet Union indirectly, and all of the goods, because of the American embargo, all of the goods came from the Soviet Union, and so they had all of these old Russian diesel engines, which, you can imagine what those sound like and run like, in these classic 1950s and 40s cars. So it's a kind of interesting. And in our group, of course, every time one of these classic cars came by, all the guys were like, I had one of those cars when I was a kid. And John can tell us every detail of this was one we all really enjoyed. Do you remember what it was? It was at the gas station. I think it was a Buick, right? It's a Buick. Yeah. So yeah, something like that. There is. The thing in the windshield. Right, that little cutout of the windshield. That was great. The countryside, we saw as we were driving from Santa Clara into Havana, the countryside is really interesting, but you see very impoverished. Again, this was a land that one after another, these monocultures was the only crop that was grown, with sugar and tobacco. There's one other crop that was really popular for rum was produced there for sure, but there was coffee. Yes, so the land is pretty devastated because it just had been kind of sucked dry from these major crops. But part of what you're reminded at various moments of the beauty of the island and the fact that you are on an island. So you have to kind of get those reminders every once in a while. We did some touring. It's good to see ourselves being, tourists, and We actually got to visit with John Lennon, who surprisingly is there. There's John right there in the middle. You could see him. That was actually a story because the rock music was considered, degenerate as a communist country. But then it sort of turned out that Fidel kind of liked the Beatles. And so he allowed a statue of John Lennon to be in this park, so we got to have a little visit there. One of the things we talked about when we were at that park is about housing, which is very interesting. I mentioned that healthcare is completely free and readily available in Cuba. Also, people generally speaking don't pay rent. Housing is free. You can buy, but very few people buy. Only those who can really afford it. But mostly, government kind of assigns you an apartment to live in. But there are all of these old houses around that were abandoned after 1959, when so many of the wealthy people left. Once they had been gone for a period of time, if they didn't come back, and it was difficult for people to come back, the country nationalized their homes. And many of those grand old homes got turned into individual apartment buildings. So, they would take all of the bedrooms of those homes and they would just divide it up into individual homes. Many of these are just squatters who've claimed these bedrooms in some of these grand homes. And the problem is that people were talking to us about it is that, they would take very good care of the room that they were living in, but no one cared about the house because that wasn't their problem. But it was actually nobody's problem. So the house itself would fall into this terrible disrepair, even though people would be living in it, and people could be living in some very, very difficult situations. Some of the sort of small back streets, and in one of those small back streets in Havana, we were taken to the Orthodox synagogue that was there. This is the synagogue Adat Yisrael, the only Orthodox synagogue in Havana, meaning the only Orthodox synagogue in Cuba, serving about 135 people. We were downstairs in the small chapel, but the large sanctuary, which I think is probably used maybe occasionally for holidays or things like that, very beautiful large sanctuary, and you can see that at one time it housed services for quite a number of people. Our guide there, he was Joseph. Very interesting man. Everybody kind of looked at him and assumed he's a rabbi. He was not a rabbi. In fact, when I asked how many rabbis are there in Cuba, they said, when you leave, there'll be none. So I had the pleasure of being the only rabbi, which made me, I guess, the chief rabbi of Cuba at that time. There are rabbis who come in and do special events or train B'nai Mitzvah kids or things along those lines. They might come from the States, they might come from Central America, but no rabbis there. He is, in fact, the shochet, though. And this was a very interesting thing. He is the kosher slaughterer. And he was responsible for the kosher meat in Cuba. Now, one of the interesting things is it's very hard to get meat in Cuba, unless you're kosher. In which case it's highly subsidized, so it's actually, even by our standards, very inexpensive, and also not really generally available. So it's kind of an interesting question, like how the Jewish community, it's a small number of people who actually keep kosher. There's probably a larger number of people who say, oh, sure, I keep kosher, because this is the only way that they can get meat. I asked this question about, is there resentment? Because, the Jewish community sends some goods and services, you have kosher meats and all those kinds of things. They said no, that there really is, and this was reinforced everywhere we went, there is zero anti-Semitism in Cuba. It's quite fascinating. Our argument, Linda was said, of course, there are no Jews. How could there be anti-Semitism? But, and my response was, When did that ever stop anti-Semitism? You know? But I think this is ideological. Is there really no anti-Semitism? Who knows? But this is part of the communist ideal, right? They also will say that there's no racism. Is there really no racism? Who knows? But that is the ideal, that there is no differentiation. If you're a citizen, you're a citizen, and it doesn't matter your race, it doesn't matter your religion, it doesn't matter your color, it doesn't matter anything, right? Now, that's the ideal, and of course, you know, we don't always live in the ideal, but that's the revolutionary concept. You know, from the political standpoint, you know, yes, it's a place where you can't publicly criticize the government and you get in trouble for criticizing the government. But I'd say I've visited communist countries before, and you get a kind of feeling, even though people can't speak freely, but you get a feeling of like, this is tough. Like the repression is hard. And I really did not feel that in Cuba. It's very interesting. You really had a feeling that people believed in the revolution. They believed in the ideas. They're not saying that everything's wonderful. And they would certainly say that you know, the economy is a disaster, and central planning tends to be bad for everybody. It's not that they're in love with the government, but the ideals of the revolution actually does feel like it's a genuine pride. Which I did find really, really quite fascinating. Again, still in the Orthodox synagogue, they are central for distributing kosher food for not just meat, but kosher food of all kind that's brought in. If you want matzah, you can get year-round because it's easy to transport, right? So Canadians and others send a lot of matzah, and besides, who wants to keep their year-old matzah around? But in all fairness, there is a lot of food that's distributed through the Jewish community there. I also found this kind of interesting. There was a plaque. They had a plaque from some of the synagogues that don't exist anymore. There were consolidations of many of these, and this from the oldest synagogue from 1904 of the American. I can't say it anymore, UHC, the Union of American Hebrew Congregations, the Reform Movement. So it was the early Reform synagogue in Cuba that now exists only as a plaque on the wall of the Orthodox synagogue. One of the other things that people talked about in terms of just the life in Cuba is how much time is spent with just taking care of the basic necessities of life. Right? You can get food. It's not easy, but you can get food. But what you don't do is make a one-stop grocery store and get everything you need. It is going from one shop to another shop to another shop to another shop and spending the day essentially doing groceries. So vegetables, which looked beautiful, but you get them on the stands on the street. So it's a kind of a lot of awareness of what you have to go through to get through the necessities of life. I would say that the other piece that we talked about a lot was just how expensive everything is right now. They are experiencing, we talk about the inflation that we're experiencing here and around the world. That's a reality post-COVID. Their inflation is about 300%. Prices just have gone through the roof post-COVID. And that's if you can get things. So the real day-to-day for most Cubans is extremely, extremely difficult. And in the midst of all of that, there is also beauty and life and color and music. And that was really a great thing. A star was born. Marty, was with just a very gentle invitation. Would anyone like to come up? Boom, there she was. And she was playing, and we got to hear some really great music. The music we were playing at the beginning of the service before we came in was from this group that was just playing for us. This is just in a restaurant. The Grand Synagogue, the Temple Beth Shalom, the Grand Synagogue of Havana, which is really the main synagogue in the country. This is a central place for the Cuban Jewish community. This is a place that actually welcomes everybody. Although we had an Orthodox synagogue, this is, I believe they're affiliated with the conservative movement, it is open to everybody. And the education, the school is the Einstein School that educates the young people, is housed in this synagogue as well. And it brings in all Jewish kids from all over. We brought a number of supplies. This is what was our guide, Hallett. Is that how you pronounce it? Something along those lines. And this was the central place to bring. So most of what we brought was here because they distribute it for everyone, and they get a lot of supplies from the Joint Distribution Committee. The religious school there was really quite lovely, and we were very taken with it. Bright, beautiful. You could just see, we didn't see it while it was in session, but you could see the kids gathered. We did take a picture of a couple of little kids. But the school really reaches the Jewish community very well. I don't think it's weekly. I think it's probably twice a month that they gather. But they educate from little children through teens. This is the inside of the sanctuary, quite a beautiful, grand space. And we're really fortunate to be able to see that and to bring, again, a few gifts. This was some of the duffel bags of goods that we brought. Not only do they serve as a distribution site for people who come, part of the work that they do is to actually go and gather the Jews who are around and bring them to the synagogue, both to enable them to get goods that they might need and for services. So the van that they have is very important to the community. When John asked the leaders of the community, what's the most important thing that you have, if you could have any amount of money, what is it that you really need most urgently? And the answer was that this van had just broken down, and it was many thousands of dollars to repair it. And that was the essential need. And I should tell you, I'll do the pitch right now, we came back and a number of us decided that we would raise the money to help for the repair of that van. So among our group, we've raised a few $1,000s so far, and we're encouraging anybody who wants to contribute. It will go to the repair of the van or just to the needs of the community, which really is an everyday experience. And that is, you can call the temple and they can make that donation. And this is money that's actually going to be hand carried by our guide, Bill Cardiff, and his next trip in April is going to take the cash with it, because you can't do transfers or any of those kinds of things. So it's only by hand carrying funds that they can get it. Again, so much color in all of our touring. We also went to the Sephardic synagogue in Havana, and Marty and John had brought a siddur from that synagogue as a gift from that synagogue to bring to the community. And so we were able to hand that community from Avat Achim. And we said we met the leader of the Sephardic community, Shmuel. Shmuel is a Ashkenazi Litvak. There nothing Sephardic about him. He was actually the most entertaining of all of the Jewish community that we met. He was just fascinating. He told great stories, but it was they said they're maintaining the Sephardic rites and rituals because it's familiar. It's what people had, and they want to kind of maintain that tradition. But there are really no Sephardic Jews left. So this is really part of it. How they're going to survive is the ongoing question. And they had actually moved out of their sanctuary. Their sanctuary that they had was now a dance studio. And they have all the chairs and the ark and other kinds of things that they brought over from that. We were able to go to the cemetery. There is an Ashkenazic and a Sephardic cemetery, two different cemeteries because Jews. But we visited the Ashkenazic cemetery, and there they had a small memorial for the Holocaust. So we were able, as a group, to say Kaddish there. Music. This again another high point. This was a wonderful group, the Habana Campos Dance Troupe, doing a blend of Afro-Cuban fusion. That was just lots of fun. They were dancing and singing as well. It was quite a remarkable experience.
That's where my maraca.
And the maraca, and the claves is from there, right? And the beauty of the island. And we had a lot of very good food. They did feed us. You know, it's strange to be a tourist and learn about how difficult life is. And of course, the tourists are eating, wonderfully. But the people that we would meet at these restaurants were really wonderful and engaging, and as I said, a lot of music. There's a composite picture, but I just wanted to show the waiters. Once the singer was going, the waiters all lined up and pulled out the maracas and claves, and they were playing along as well. That's really significant. Fidel and the synagogues also were very proud. All of them showed us pictures of a time that Fidel visited the synagogue. There was when the Pope was there, Fidel came and visited the synagogue as well, and they saw that as a real source of pride. We were able to, again, this was some of the goods that we were able to bring to the community back at the Central Synagogue. We went back for Friday night services, and they were kind enough to invite me to give a brief Devar Torah. The service was really quite remarkable because it was led by the kids. All the post-B'nai Mitzvah up to college-age kids were the leaders of the service. And I mean, we, as Cantor said when we were in our service earlier, we were a little bit shocked because we were waiting for the Sephardic melodies. It was going to be so great. And the melodies were straight out of the camp Young Shadia that I grew up in. They were familiar to us, and undoubtedly it's because the tutors for these kids were American rabbis who came and would teach them. So they had that experience. But they did the kids did a wonderful job leading the service. And at the conclusion of it, there was a special tefillat haderech, a traveler's prayer for a group of these young adults who were going on birthright, which is a wonderful thing. They're having that experience of going to Israel, but it's bittersweet because the truth is those kids are probably, at some point or another, all going to make Aliyah to Israel. Because once they getting to Israel, even though there's no diplomatic relationship between Cuba and Israel, they have maintained the hostilities since the Russian times, since 1973. But they're able to get there, and once they get there, of course, they have right of return as Jews, and so it's a very good. There are lots of good opportunities for these young Cuban Jews when they get to Israel. So that leaves the question of what's going to happen as the elderly stay behind and all of the young people wind up leaving. What is going to happen to this community? And when we would ask that question of the Jews who were there, the answer was universally, to be Jewish is to have hope. They hold out hope. And one of the things, this was just kind of interesting because the Siddur, seeing the Siddur in Spanish was this was the candle lighting. And you have these experiences of seeing the young people. And really when you see, this was a community center in the poorest neighborhood. I mean, they don't take tourists there, let me tell you. In fact, so much they don't take tourists that our bus driver got lost several times because the road is blocked off here and it's blocked off there, and it's crazy. But this is where they don't take tourists. And the poverty was really profound. And in the midst of it, there was this guitar chorus, a group called Clave de Sol. And these kids, free guitar lessons. They have to provide an instrument, or if they can't, they will have instruments. People bring instruments as gifts to them, and those are provided to the kids. And these kids were so talented in the music. They were really incredible. We were watching a video a little bit earlier of one of this young girl who, maybe 14, 15 years old, they asked for an encore, and they just pointed to her, "You go sing something." She hadn't prepared anything, and we were floored. I mean, our jaws were on the ground. It was so beautiful, so heartfelt, and you just hear that music is just so uplifting to everybody who's there. Again, our classic cars. And the music that's around everywhere. So I just want to conclude this with a little bit of the technical piece and the part that I really want to leave us with. I've talked about the embargo. We had an opportunity to hear from an economist, former diplomat. We learned that Cuba actually, I didn't see it in the news. Cuba just adopted a new constitution. And it's a constitution that was essentially done as a plebiscite. The people, the constitution was kind of put out, and there were community gatherings, and people would yell at each other and rewrite the constitution and vote on it as a complete society. And we just hearken back to the founding of the United States and what we went through. They just went through that process, and it's really quite fascinating just how they went through that. But the embargo is really what's talked about, and the embargo is really is very serious. As I said, it's very, very difficult to get any kinds of goods into the country. It's a long-standing embargo back from 1962 under Kennedy, and has been renewed several times. Interestingly enough, we all remember, I don't have any pictures of it, but we remember when President Obama went to Cuba, visited Cuba, first American president to visit Cuba, and opened Cuba up, lifted, he did everything administratively. Congress didn't go along with him, but he did everything that he could do administratively to loosen the embargo, not lift it, but to loosen it as much as possible. And cruise ships were coming into Cuba. You can imagine how important the tourist industry would be. And the harbor was evidently filled with cruise ships and all kinds of things that were being able to be brought in. When Trump was elected, there was a real question about what he was going to do. People said, Trump wanted to build a tower in Havana, so maybe a businessman, maybe he would see that there would be value in doing trade and all of those kinds of things, but the anti-immigrant attitude that was a part of the Trump administration took over. And in fact, the administration under Trump put back the embargoes that Obama had lifted, undoubtedly in part because it was Obama, and made them worse. So that actually right now, they're living under more difficult conditions than even before Obama's time. The cruise ships, they described to us, one day the harbor is full of cruise ships, and the very next day, zero. That's how this worked. It was just profound and impossible. And remember that in when the embargo was imposed because Cuba was a communist country. You had the Cuban Missile Crisis. You have a communist state 90 miles away from Miami. There was the Cold War. It made sense, right? You want to try to put up a wall. You want to try to force the people to overthrow their leaders.